everybody. Welcome to Pragmatics 670, our Summer 2 course. What you see in front of you is the syllabus that is online. So there are two sections online. One section is just the face-to-face people, okay? And all your doc shares and everything will be in that section. And the other section is everybody that's out there who's online, okay? For those of you that are in here, you'll turn in your grades directly to us, your homework directly to us by email, okay? You will not be using the grade book online, all right? But everybody who's online, you'll be using everything up online, okay? Let me do a quick description here to make sure we're all in the same spot. This is all stuff that you want to familiarize yourself with. We will explain what your comprehension reviews are and your final take-home exam. Then there's a lot of information about online courses that you want to familiarize yourself with. The final thing I wanted to point out is this. This is your class activities for the 5 weeks. What you can see is for each week, you're going to have 2 videos. So for those of you that are online, there will be 2 videoed lectures. The first one is will be online for you already. It's up. It's lecture number 1. It's online for the people. It's already loaded for the people online. It's already loaded for the face-to-face. The second video is this one. It's online for everybody online, and for the face-to-face people, this is the one that you come to. So for the face-to-face people, there's 2 lectures for you. This is one of them, and then you'll also be watching one of them online every week, okay? And just let me know if you have any confusion. Each lecture will have a comprehension review of 5 questions attached to it with the due date that you see right there. Okay, that's in fact the Sunday of every week. Okay, the comprehension reviews will go up on either Tuesday or Wednesday. They will go up tomorrow, correct? Yeah. Yeah, they will be up there tomorrow for you all. And then here you have the topics of the lectures. I want to make one thing. I've written this up on the online people, but I want to be absolutely clear with everybody. The PowerPoints that go with the lectures are not enough for you to just watch the PowerPoints and think that you're going to be fine. Okay? The comprehension reviews are written with the lecture in mind as well as the PowerPoint. Okay? So those of you who are face-to-face, you want to watch the lecture number 1, and look at the PowerPoint, okay? Then your second lecture, you're in here, right? Those of you who are online, you need to watch both lectures, see both PowerPoints, okay? I really can't emphasize that enough. If you don't watch the lecture, you just try and use the PowerPoint, you're going to get confused, and you're probably not going to do very well in the comprehension reviews, okay? Okay. I think that takes care. We don't have any reading, we might have some suggested reading for you, but we don't have any texts. We'll be doing that as a lecture basis. Does anyone face-to-face have any questions that you think are... Does that sound fairly straightforward? Diego says yes. Jade says yes. Amanda Kay, yes. Okay.
Just to confirm, you told just send by email, or just the people who are online class just by email?
Okay. So when it comes to the comprehension reviews, everybody who is online will be uploading them to the site. to the Dropbox with the name on it, okay? But those of you who are face-to-face, there is no Dropbox name and there is no online grading, okay? So you are just going to send it directly to either to me or Dr. Hurtado. It doesn't really matter, but it's fine. You're just going to send it directly on Sunday by midnight. You will send it directly to our email because there's only 5 of you, okay?
Actually, why don't we put on the comprehension review for the face-to-face people who to email it to?
Sure.
That
Okay,
way-
sure. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So, but everybody online, you will do it Sunday by midnight and you'll have a Dropbox that says comprehension review number 1 and we'll do your online grading and so on. Okay? Good question. Any other questions? Attilio, does that all make sense to you?
Yes, I mean, I understand exactly what you mean. And when you say comprehension reviews, is it something about it's a sort of explanation of what I got from the 2 videos? For example, I already watched the 2 videos from Dr. Hurtado from this morning about semantics, the 2 YouTube videos. I went through these 2 videos and then do I need, for example, to summarize or create a sort of synthesis of what this lecture were about?
No.
God help us, no.
No. What's going to happen, Attilio, is you're going to go tomorrow and take a look and you'll find a document called Comprehension Review number 1.
Okay.
And it will have 5 questions on it. And those 5 questions will all have to do with lecture number 1 of semantics. You answer those 5 questions and then you're going to email that by Sunday the
Wrong.
16th.
Attilio's in the online section.
Oh, Attilio's in the online section. Well,
Get your act straight,
Oh,
Dr.
God.
Kicker. Now, Attilio, you will upload it in the Dropbox.
Dropbox.
Okay.
If, Attilio, if you have any questions at all, just about where to put your homework, you can email me or email Shihun, and he'll tell you, he's our teaching assistant, so he'll tell you where to put that. But you're looking for an actual set of questions. You don't have to make anything up. There'll be 5 questions and that relate directly to the lecture and the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you. I got it.
Yeah, no, good question, because everybody else who hasn't done a comprehension review will have that question too. Nothing else we can think of right now? Okay. All right, then in that case, we are going to move on to the content part of the lecture for this week, which is speech acts. And the way this is going to work this semester is we have a content-based issue like speech acts, like what are speech acts in pragmatics, what does it mean? And then I come along and give you a lecture on how that applies to second language acquisition and ESL, EFL, okay? So, for example, Dr. Hurtado gives you a lecture on politeness, and then I give you a lecture on how politeness has been addressed in ESL and SLA, and that's how that works. So you basically have a theoretical lecture and then an applied lecture, and that's how we're gonna do that, okay? All right. Whenever you're, so you need to talk about the Kubi thing, unless you want me to.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Where to find it?
It's under,
Can I?
Yes. Okay. All right. So one of the features that this class has is that even if you're taking the class online, you can log in live and participate in the class like Attilio is doing right now from Italy. So from anywhere in the world. And where have they been uploaded, the instructions? They are in the Dropbox?
they're in Dropbox. No, they're in
DocShare.
DocShare. They're in DocShare.
So if you look into doc sharing, you will see Kubi message that explains how to do it, why to do it, And then there's this Zoom how-to user guide that tells you how to practically do it. Okay, it's actually very, very simple. You can do it from your phone, you can do it from an iPad, you can do it from your desktop, and you can be here and you can control one of these little machines, and you can actually turn the machine around, and you can talk to the other students in the class, ask questions, etc.
So Amanda Kay, this is what I was telling you if you can't make it last.
So it's really cutting edge. In fact, it's surprising that it's working as well as it is, because it doesn't always work. But so that's an opportunity. If you're taking the class online, you can actually, as I said, be here live when we are doing the lecture, and participate. Now, obviously, you have to remember that then it's 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, and wherever you are, you need to do the conversion for the time. And of course, if you'd rather ask the questions in the virtual office, you can do that as well. All right. So today we're going to talk about speech acts. That's the topic of the lecture. So what I'm going to do is start with a little bit of a historical background so that you understand sort of the general sort of cultural environment, what the Germans call Weltanschauung, fascinating word that's almost impossible to spell. It has two U's in a row. But basically, it's post-war England, and we're talking about World War II. And it really has to do with two major thinkers, Austin and Wittgenstein. Now, Austin was at Oxford, and Wittgenstein was at Cambridge. And interestingly enough, the two did not like each other. They didn't particularly get along. That's irrelevant, though. The thing is this, that Austin is associated in the history of philosophy with this idea of ordinary language philosophy. Wittgenstein, it's a way more complicated story. He's one of the, whereas Austin is very readable, and the book in which he introduced the whole idea of speech acts is called How to Do Things with Words. And that's a book that I recommend for anybody who wants to read a real book written by a real philosopher, not a textbook, the real thing. I say read that because it's very accessible. Even undergraduates can do it. Conversely, Wittgenstein is widely reputed to be one of the most difficult philosophers ever. I can tell you, I first read Wittgenstein's first book. He published two major books. His first book he published in 1918, I think, or 1919, and it's called Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. The title is in Latin, just to make things easy. And I didn't understand a single word of it. And it took me literally 25 years of reading and researching to be able to actually understand it and then explain it to my students. So it's that complicated. And then on top of it, after he published the book, in which he answered all the questions of philosophy, by the way, he then sort of said it's all nonsense, went on to be a teacher in a remote part of Austria, built a house for his sister, emigrated to England, gave away all of his fortune. He was wealthy, his family was very, very rich. He gave away all of his fortune to his sister, and moved to England, studied with Bertrand Russell, started teaching philosophy, and then eventually moved to a secluded house in Norway because he just couldn't stand to talk to people. He is my idol, as you can imagine. My real goal in life is to move to a secluded island in Texas, and which is a problem because there are not many islands in Texas. South Padre Island is not secluded, so we're doomed. All right, okay. So what does it mean, ordinary language philosophy? What are we talking about here? Well, basically, the basic idea, the fundamental idea, is that language is actually not a problem, but that it helps us understand things about the way things are. Okay, now you may say, well, isn't that obvious? Well, perhaps, but you have to put it into context. And the context is that for hundreds and hundreds of years, logicians had been basically saying, look, everyday language is terrible, it's confusing, it's ambiguous, it's hard to understand. What we need to do is we need to clean it up. And that's why we need logic, right? And so they came up with the whole science of logic and a whole notation system, etc., in order to say this is a better version than ordinary language. Ordinary language is confusing, logic is clear, simple, straightforward, unambiguous, much better. Okay? And so you have Leibniz, Spinoza, all these guys, they say, we can improve on natural language, on ordinary language, by having logic. And logic is much better because it allows you to communicate better, to clarify your thoughts, etc. So for Austin to say, no, forget that, actually ordinary language, natural language, is actually quite helpful, is quite a significant departure from hundreds of years of, basically logicians putting down a natural language. And again, from within philosophy, the logicians just won just completely the discussion. That is, nobody until Austin came along really said there's anything helpful in natural language. I mean, to be a philosopher was to learn how to apply logic, and you still find this even to this day in many college curricula. There is a course on critical thinking where they teach you logic, they teach you fallacies, etc., and it's all about being careful about what you say in ordinary language. Okay, you may have come across something like this. Okay, so what's the argument that Austin puts forward? Well, it's actually a very clever argument, because Austin says, well, think about it for a second. People have been using ordinary language to talk to each other for, a very long time, right? I mean, actually 8,000 years. Austin doesn't go that far, but, centuries for sure, right? So if language were really radically inefficient or radically unsuited to communicating, it would have long ago fallen away, because people would have found a better way, a more practical way of communicating, okay? In fact, the people have tried, okay? How many of you have heard of Esperanto? Okay, yeah. So Esperanto is an artificial language that was invented by a guy named Zamenhof. And the only reason I know that because a friend of mine lived in Zamenhof Way, and they named the street after the guy. So that's how I know that. But anyway, he came up with this language, which supposedly was a universal language because it blended like 5 or 6 natural languages. His idea was that it was easier to learn, and most importantly, it was regular. There were no exceptions in Esperanto. Okay, and so actually it was quite successful, and people have estimated that up to 1 million people on Earth actually at some point spoke Esperanto. There's even been native speakers of Esperanto. Esperantists, who are people who speak Esperanto, they get together at conferences, and apparently some couples, after they got together, they decided that they liked each other and wanted to pursue the study of Esperanto more intimately, if you catch my drift. And children were born and they were raised in Esperanto. Okay, so Esperanto actually acquired native speakers. Dr. Pickering is horrified by this news, but So people tried to do this, and of course, none of these artificial languages ever really succeeded. Esperanto is the one that worked the best. There's many other, Volapük, Logjam. I mean, people come up with new, artificial languages all the time. There's a great book by Umberto Eco, by the way, on artificial languages. If you're interested, you can look it up. And occasionally, I've had people mail me their books in which they present their artificial language that they've invented, it's like, all right. So the fact that these artificial languages never really caught on tells you that, well, natural languages aren't doing so bad, okay? And so Austin says, if natural languages have been used for so long, well, they must be pretty reasonably okay tools to communicate with, okay? And, now obviously there's an obvious objection to this claim, which is, we say the sun rises and the sun sets, and of course it's the other way around, okay? The sun doesn't move at all. Well, the sun actually moves, but relative to the earth rises and sets around the sun, okay? But because, language was, the metaphor was created a long time ago, before we were aware of the correct movement, it looked like the sun was the one doing the moving, okay? So, or, there's other examples. We refer to whales as fish, whereas, of course, they're not. They're mammals, okay? And other things like that, okay? So then an objection would be, well, but sometimes language is wrong, okay? Well, true, says Austin, but that's not where I would be looking for language to be particularly correct, because after all, if we all agree that a whale is not a fish, well, all right, we just have to correct this particular belief, but otherwise, we still can identify whales, we still can hunt whales, and so on and so forth. And so, the fact that it's a fish or not a fish, who cares, right? If I told you today that tuna happened to be not a fish, but something else, would you stop eating tuna? No, you'd say, all right, fine. I didn't know that tuna was, something else, and you still eat tuna, okay? In fact, I know a story, I don't know if it's true, that somebody thought that tuna was chicken because it was labeled chicken of the sea.
No, it's what's her name?
Who? Jessica Simpson.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so it's a true story.
It's a true story.
Okay, you see, now I am horrified that in fact I thought it was a joke. That somebody...
No.
All right, so tell us, Dr. Pickering.
Well, who was she married to? Who was she married to?
Lachey.
Yeah, Nick Lachey. Yeah, from what band? From a band.
All right, okay.
NSYNC, probably,
Yeah.
where we were, and they had a reality show when they got married. And at one point in the reality show, she says, "Oh, isn't this chicken for the tuna?" And Nick Lachey is like clearly horrified. The guy's married her, and then he's just like, he can't believe that she really thinks that.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you correct, so who was the Jessica Simpson?
Jessica Simpson.
So if you correct Jessica Simpson and tell her, well, in fact, tuna is not chicken, it's in fact a fish, fine. She still can find the can, she still can ask for it, and so on and so forth, right? So nothing really important has changed, okay? But if suddenly you realize that asking wasn't done the way that you always thought, you realize, oh my God, I never realized that you weren't just allowed to walk into a store, pick up the merchandise and walk out. You were supposed to pay? No one told me that. That explains why people have been arresting me for the past 20 years, right? So you see what that would be like a serious problem of communication, right? So Austin says correctly, is that where it's going to be interesting is social constructs, okay? Because those exist as part of a convention. And so if I say this is hot and this is cold, I can go and touch it and say, well, okay, it's hot, so now I know that it's hot. If you tell me that it's cold, I say, well, you're out of your mind, it's hot, right? But if I ask somebody, did you steal this hat? You say, no, I just walked into the store, put it on my head and walked out, right? And the difference here is that, well, if we all agreed that that was a perfectly normal thing to do, it wouldn't be stealing. Okay? So stealing only exists within the context of a set of social conventions that include private property, the idea of payment, the idea of taking something without paying for it, etc., etc., etc. Okay? So the meaning of the word steal is determined largely by the set of social conventions that surround the idea of, well, taking property without paying. Property that is not yours without paying. Okay? And so, basically, Austin says, that if we look at these kind of facts that Durkheim calls social fact, right? Then, that's where the argument, becomes much stronger, that ordinary language can actually tell you something about the social fact, okay? So here's an example of a social fact, and the example is money, okay? So technically, money is just a piece of paper, okay? That's printed with ink, and that's it, right? So for somebody who didn't know what money was, they would be like, oh, okay, look, a portrait of a guy here, with must be important because he's number one, and that's that. There's some weird symbols and what have you, but what is that, right? Money becomes valuable only when there is a convention that says that you can exchange it for goods. Okay? It used to be that you could exchange it for gold. And then in the 70s, they got rid of this convention, and they said, no, we're no longer, going to guarantee. It used to be that you could literally walk into a bank and say, here's $1, give me $1's worth of gold. And they should have given it to you. Now, practically speaking, they would have booted you out for being stupid. But technically, you could go to the US government and say, give me $1's worth of gold. Okay, and the US government used to keep in Fort Knox huge amounts of gold that guaranteed the value of the money that was in circulation. Okay, and so what they did when they removed the disparity was, that they no longer need to keep as much gold in one physical gold in one place to, account for the value of the money. Okay, so then the value of the dollar bill only comes from the fact that if I give you $1, you will give me a cup of coffee, or you used to give me a cup of coffee. Today, a cup of coffee is far more expensive than $1. Okay, so basically you can get goods from it, right? Outside of that convention, money is no longer money. It's just a piece of paper. Okay, so that's why we say that money is a social fact. Okay. So now let's talk about Wittgenstein, and let me reassure you. I told you that his first book is extremely difficult, basically almost impenetrable. But then, as I said, he moved away from this, and he wrote a second book that he published posthumously, in which basically he presents an almost opposite view from language and communication that he had in the first book. So we don't need to discuss his first view, God help us. I mean, that's really complicated. But let's talk about the second Wittgenstein, okay? And the book was published in 1953 and is called as the Philosophical Investigations. And it basically consists of a series of short thoughts, sort of arranged in an order, but sometimes it's not clear why they are in that order. And so it's actually still kind of complicated to figure it out. But the most important thing, and the central tenet of Wittgenstein's second theory, is the first bullet point there. The meaning of a word is its use in language. Okay? And that is a strikingly deep thought. Okay? Because what it means, it's not just like, oh, well, it means whatever you want. That's not it at all. But what it means is a word means what it means because that's the way that people use it. Okay? You see the difference between, oh, it just means whatever you want, and you look at what people are doing with it, and that's the meaning of the word or the meaning of the sentence and what have you. Okay? And basically, then Wittgenstein goes even a step further than Austin, because Austin said, well, ordinary language is just as good as, logic. It's just a different way of looking at things. Wittgenstein says, no. Philosophy is wrong, because philosophy is asking literally the wrong kind of questions. Because the moment you ask a question such as, there is being, right? We can say, this bottle is, okay? So it is in the state of being. And then we say, well, what is non-being, right? And this is a question that, for example, Heidegger would have asked, okay? Heidegger talks a lot about not being, okay? Wittgenstein says that question is a grammatical mistake. It's not a valid question. You can't ask it. And the moment you ask that question, any answer to it is going to be nonsense. Okay? So Wittgenstein says it's this kind of philosophical question that goes outside of the normal uses of language that leads philosophy to making mistakes and talking nonsense, because it's going outside of the boundaries of natural language. Okay? So Wittgenstein is in fact more radical in terms, basically he says, philosophers have gotten it wrong all along. Ordinary people speaking ordinary language, that's the meaning of the language. That's when language is working properly. Okay? So again, that's a deep thought. The other big idea that Wittgenstein introduces is this idea of language game. Okay? And why does he call these language games? Well, because this comes into the series of examples, it's a direct quote from the book, comes in the context of discussing family resemblances. Okay? And this is another concept that's crucial in Wittgenstein. So Wittgenstein says there are ideas, there are thoughts, there are concepts that come with a resemblance to other ideas. Much like if you look at, two sisters, they look like they look not exactly alike. I'm not talking about twins, okay? But if you look at, for example, if you look at me and my sister, you say, oh yeah, I can see that, the shape of the face, the nose, the color of the hair, I don't know. Even though we don't necessarily look alike, for example, my sister doesn't have as much facial hair as I do, as I'm sure she's happy to report, right? So you wouldn't confuse us, right? But still, you say, oh yeah, there is a resemblance, between these two people. That's a family resemblance, okay? So Wittgenstein says this is true also of the meaning of certain words. And the example that he uses is the word game, okay? That is, what does it mean to say that something is a game? Are there any features that all games have in common, except that of being called games, of course, right? And the answer to that is no, there aren't, okay? And that is a very serious problem for philosophy, for logic, because since the days of Aristotle, okay, we're going back to, Greece, like 2,000 years before Christ, right? Since the days of Aristotle, actually it wasn't 2,000 years, but about 800, the definition of words was always by saying there is one thing that all the words that share this term have in common, and that was called the essence of the word, right? Wittgenstein says not true. Okay, so you cannot say, well, all dogs share one thing in common. Well, maybe dogs, perhaps, but for something like games, there isn't a feature that all games share. Okay, and you can try as you may. In fact, sort of think about it for 5 minutes, and you may say, well, all games involve, that they're not serious. It's like, all right, look at professional sports. Is that not serious? That's very serious, right?
Oh, so I guess I'm thinking that, the purpose of games is fun, but, right.
Not at all. There can be games that are for training. There can be educational games. There can be, professional games.
But isn't the point that you use those games in education because they're supposed to be fun?
Yes, there is some entertainment.
Well,
Yeah.
all right. So,
I mean, isn't the essence of a game?
are there? Can you think of a game that doesn't provide entertainment?
Silent game.
Pardon me?
The silent game.
The silent game. That's a good example.
What's the silent game?
What's the silent game?
It's a game that parents use to get their children to be quiet.
You say, okay, now we're playing the silent game. Don't make any noise.
Whoever's quiet the longest wins.
Oh.
But we could argue they provide entertainment for the parents.
Yeah.
That could be an argument. No, but I mean, there's all sorts of games that aren't necessarily entertaining. I mean, like.
Well, not necessarily entertaining.
I mean, chess, is that entertaining?
No, not necessarily.
Yeah, for some people, like,
Yeah, like.
Not if you play seriously.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, tennis, is that entertaining?
Yes, of course it is.
Nadal Federer is entertaining for
Well,
Nadal and Federer.
Not
Well,
this last match, no.
well, no, I don't know. 'Cause I didn't
Sadly,
see it.
Nadal.
Well,
That
whatever.
was
But I mean,
something of a disaster.
there's other things like, they involve the use of a ball. Well, not all of them do,
No,
right?
but what about something like it's not work? I guess that's not true
That's
either,
not
because
true.
for some people games are
Professional,
work.
yeah,
Right.
there's professional video games, people that play video games professionally, I mean, it's, so no, I mean, look, my point is try, but don't try too hard, because professional philosophers have spent, significant amount of time trying to come up with a counterexample,
Right.
and to my knowledge, nobody has ever been able to come up with it. Okay, so then based on this idea of game in the family resemblance sense, then Wittgenstein says, well, using language is like playing games in that sense. Okay, that is that there's a vast class of activities, some of which will share some features, much like some games are played on a board, but then there's a bunch of games that are not played on a board, right? So they share some features, but there isn't necessarily one feature that's shared by all of them. Okay, that's the whole point. Okay, and he gives a list of these language games. Okay, and by the way, other scholars, for example, Stephen Levinson, who wrote one of the basic textbooks about pragmatics, and also is the Levinson and Brown and Levinson that we're going to talk about in politeness theory, called these activity types. Okay, so there's all sorts of terminology for that. So, for example, giving an order and obeying an order, right? That's a game in the special sense that Wittgenstein has, right? That is, there's ways of giving an order and obeying an order, right? So if I say, Shihun, pick up that envelope on the floor, that's a properly given order, right? And then Shihun obeys by picking up the envelope, or disobeys by not picking up the envelope, right? So that's how you play the language game of giving an order and obeying or disobeying. Okay, now, let's say that I went over there and picked up the envelope. That's the wrong way of playing the language game of giving an order. That's not how you do orders, right? Or you do it yourself, well, you no longer gave an order, right? You failed at giving orders, okay? I mean, and children, you know, have to be taught how to do this, okay? One of the funniest moments of my life as a parent was when my daughter was maybe 2. I said to her, time out, you were bad, now you're going time out. And she looked at me and says, you're being bad, I give you a timeout. And I couldn't keep a straight face. I started laughing hysterically, which is very, very bad for educational purposes, let me tell you. But because I was like, oh my God, she doesn't understand. You know, the child cannot give a timeout to the parent. It doesn't work that way, right? That was a language game. And because she was so little, she didn't know how to play the language game. Okay, and when you get a timeout, you can cry, you can shout, you can throw things, you can go to your room, you know, all of that. You cannot say, oh no, I am giving you a timeout. It just doesn't work that way. That's not properly playing the language game, right? You know, reporting an event. Okay, how do you report an event? Well, you say, well, this happened and that happened, and then the door slammed, and then you know, the wife pulled out a gun and shot her husband. These are the kind of things that you see on television, right? That's how you report an event. This happened and then that happened and so on. If you report an event by going bang, bang, slam, slam, you'd be like, okay, what just happened? You know, well, it said I reported an event. No, you didn't. All you did was some noises that are related maybe to this event, but we don't know what you're talking about, okay? Guessing a riddle, right? How do you guess a riddle? Guess a riddle. You have a problem right now?
Like a fill in the blank?
No, I'm saying guess a riddle now. What's the problem? I didn't give you the riddle. Do you see that? You see, you're very good at playing that language game. In order to guess a riddle, you must have a riddle. Okay, such as you can say, what's black and white and red all over?
A book.
A newspaper, technically, but okay. But a book will work as well, all right? So that was a riddle, and you were supposed to guess it, okay? So that's a properly given and guess or non-guess riddle. But if I say, guess, and I didn't give you the riddle, I played the language game wrong, okay? So that's what Wittgenstein is talking about, okay? So let's leave this now on the side for a minute, because we will see that this now is going to fit in perfectly with what Austin does. And whereas Wittgenstein within philosophy is super important, his theories never really made it big into linguistics. They've had some influence, but not very big. Whereas Austin's idea have become mainstream, and they're like one of the main fields of pragmatics. Okay, so Austin, and there's the title of the book that I mentioned before, and you can see how it ties in with what Wittgenstein was talking about, how to do things with words. You could title this "How to Play Language Games," right? It would be exactly the same concept, right? As I said, if you want to read the book, go ahead and read it, because it's very clear, it's very interesting, it's very well written. He was, you know, he wrote very, very little. There's like 2 books in the entirety of his production. One is a collection of essays, and this one was published posthumously, edited by two of his students. So he starts out by talking about performativity, and that's really the starting point there. He goes on about performativity for actually most of the book, and he thinks that he can build a whole theory on that. Then he comes to the conclusion that it's not going to work, and then he shifts to then the theory of speech acts, which is this distinction between the 3 aspects of each speech act. Okay, so we're going to talk first about performativity. Okay, so First of all, Austin starts from the observation that some sentences are neither true nor false. Now, remember from the first lecture, what is philosophical semantics, truth theoretic semantics main point? The meaning of a sentence is whether it's true or false. And Austin says, forget that. Okay? So he's completely in opposition with that approach, right? But to understand how novel Austin's stance is, you have to realize that for easily 400 years, logicians had only talked about truth. Well, 200 years. Let's be more honest. Okay? So Austin says, well, there are sentences that are neither true nor false. Okay? So for example, let's say that I say, hi. That's an utterance. Was it true? Was it false? It doesn't apply, right? I mean, I just greeted you, right? You cannot falsely greet, right? I mean, it just doesn't work that way, right? Or if I say, Jihun, pick up that envelope. Is it true or false? It's an order. It's not true or false, right? I mean, so truth doesn't apply. What applies to it is other things, right? So Austin says, asking whether it's true or false is the wrong question, essentially, okay? So then what is it that makes, like, for example, when my daughter says, I give you a timeout, why do I think it's hilarious and I don't go in timeout? Okay, well, because the conditions for that sentence to work, for the language game to be successful, were not met. Okay, and Austin calls this an felicity condition. Okay, so he says either an utterance is felicitous or it is infelicitous, non-felicitous. Okay, so there is an envelope on the floor, and I say, Shihun, put that envelope on the floor. And Shihun goes, right? Why? What's the problem with saying put the envelope on the floor? It's already on the floor, right? So what's it supposed to do? Well, you could pick it up and put it back down, but that's not the same thing, okay? So in order for you to obey an order, it has to be that the world is not already the way that I describe it in my order. If I say, sit down, you're like, okay, sure, right? But it's an infelicitous order because you're already sitting, okay? So in order for an order to be felicitous, and I apologize for the pun there, for an order to be felicitous, the world has not already to be that way, okay? So these are what Austin calls felicity conditions, okay? That is, it has to be, there have to be rules that are followed for that, okay? Now, then there are sentences in which, surprisingly enough, just by saying the sentence, you make something happen, okay? And these he calls performative, okay? So, suppose that you say to your kid, if you behave, we're gonna go get ice cream, right? By having said those words, you have made a promise. Okay? If you say, I promise you that we're gonna go have ice cream if you behave, you've made a promise. Okay? And that's it. That is, now, the kids will be upset if you say, well, you did behave, but now we're not gonna go have ice cream. Okay? Why will they be upset? Because you committed yourself. Okay, you staked your good word, you know, your reliability as a person. Okay, that is your attendability in doing what you promised you were going to do. Okay, if you promise something and then you don't do it, people will say, well, he reneged on his promise. That's not good. That's a bad thing. Okay, so again, when you're doing a performative action like promising, okay, well, then the truth doesn't matter. You cannot say, oh, I promised you to go take ice cream, to take you to have ice cream if you behaved, but I didn't. It wasn't true. You say, what are you talking about? I heard you. Right? So truth is not the matter here. The matter is that by saying I promise, you promised. Okay? You know, there's plenty of examples there. Okay, so wedding. All right? When the minister or the priest or whatever says, I declare you husband and wife, then you are husband and wife. Okay? It is the ceremony that makes you husband and wife, right? Now, again, there is felicity conditions. Okay? So, for example, both parties must want this to be the case. If one of the two parties is acting under coercion, then it's not valid. Okay, etc., etc. Checkmating. If you play chess, we mentioned chess a minute ago. If you play chess seriously, and you're not just like playing around, you know that even though your king may be in a checkmate position, if your opponent doesn't say checkmate, you haven't lost. Okay? In other words, the words checkmate have to be said in order for you to actually have lost. If it so happens that your opponent doesn't notice that he gave you or she gave you checkmate, you didn't get the checkmate because they didn't perform the correct utterance. Okay? And there's plenty of this. Usually in philosophy, the examples are christening a ship, where you toss a bottle of champagne against the ship and you say, I named this ship the Queen Elizabeth III. All right, so there you go. That's now the name of the ship. And in today's day and age, it's boaty make boat face, I think, is what boats get christened. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up on Google.